No, what I think the good thing about the grass is that the birds can move through it pretty easy, and they use a lot of it for cover. But I think most of the hen pheasants are actually nesting in that heavy kochia weed. I'm of the opinion that in the spring when they're nesting, they don't produce as much scent as they do in other times of the year. And so it's much harder for the predators to find them. And they'll go into that kochia and just really sit there. And that's why I try to maintain patches of it. And since I've been criticized so much by the weed district for having kochia on my property, what I've been trying to do is provide a grass buffer all the way around the perimeters and leave the kochia weed in the middle of my property alone. But they are not happy with that. And I can see a problem if those weeds are actually threatening other people's property that are concerned about it, or agricultural land. But I've got to both the north of me and the west of my property, that's all game department land or managed by the game department, and they manage it mostly for wildlife. And I would think having kochia weeds on my property as well as their property is beneficial to the wildlife, and that's what we're trying to do. To the east of me, I have another neighbor, and he's trying to manage his little 5-acre part as a wildlife habitat and recreational property, and the weed district was on him, and he spent a fair amount of money this spring having the Bishop Spray Service come in and not just blanket spray his property. He had them going around spot spraying out the weeds on the weed list and leaving his other vegetation alone because he wanted it to be left there for wildlife habitat. That's a really expensive thing to be dealing with year after year. And we'll go up here a little bit further and I'll show you what I've been trying to do, and that's to maintain grass all the way along the roadway, spraying out the Russian thistle, the puncture vine, and kochia. And then I had a big patch of kochia that I'm sure the birds were nesting in, and I had to mow that this year, and I started mowing it, chased 3 pheasants out, and decided I'm just not mowing anymore, and I just quit and left it the way it is. So. It had to look this way because I got one of those nastygram letters from the weed district about having kochia on my property, and it needed to be controlled or they would control it. And so I wound up having to mow it all down, and then the Russian thistle started coming in right behind it, and that caused me to have to run a disc over it. I tried not to be too aggressive in doing any of that, but this was an area that I chased 3 young pheasants out of in this one little piece of area right here when I was mowing, and I was doing that in late July, early August, something like that. Well, I had preferred to just maintain my fence line as being mostly grass with where I can spot spray the weeds out. I prefer this just be left alone as kochia, so I can use it for nesting habitat with the pheasants. The other thing is you shouldn't be so critical of Russian thistle, because what I've noticed here in the summer months when that Russian thistle is young and growing, it's got all kinds of little grasshopper bugs on it. And those bugs provide protein to the young pheasants that are growing up, and just having that food base around is important. You go out in some of the other game department lands that I've seen here, and it's so dry, there's no moisture, there's no insects, there's no food, and it shouldn't be that hard to figure it out. I'm just a dumb engineer and I know all this stuff.